All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm excited. I know we all are here on this call and with our firm to have the CEO of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation here, Quentin Messer. I'm going to say that I consider him a friend. We've worked very closely together in my previous life as a legislator, into my lobby world, and with a lot of the clients. So first, I want to say thank you for joining us this afternoon and taking time for today.
Yeah, happy to do it. Happy to do it. Whatever you tell me to do, I try to typically do it, Jason.
See, that's the best. That can be scary at the same time. If you do have questions out there on webinar land, you can put them in the Q&A, and if we have time at the end, we will get to them. We do have some questions we're going to be asking as well. This webinar will be recorded and can be shared. So if someone missed it due to a scheduling conflict, and if you feel like you want to hear us talk about all things MEDC and economic development in Michigan, make sure that you share that and make sure that we have an opportunity for you to see it. So let me give you a little background of our guest of honor today. So he joins the MEDC from the New Orleans Business Alliance. He served as president and CEO there. He led initiatives in business attraction, small business growth, talent development, and equitable economic growth, securing major private investments and earning the NOLABA. That's a long acronym, by the way, but we can't really shorten it. Global accreditation from the International Economic Development Council. So that's pretty cool. You served a lot of different things in Louisiana, from the Secretary of the Louisiana Economic Development and president of the Louisiana Economic Development Corporation, which supports all business throughout Louisiana. But you also worked in the private sector, which is very important for a position like this, especially running the MEDC, because it is a very, very public-private partnership model and profile with the Boston Consulting Group. Is it O'Melveny? Is that how you pronounce it? And Myers?
O'Melveny.
O'Melveny. See, I knew I was going to screw it up, even though I read it like 4 times. And various startups, including principal at Venture Accelerator Foster Chamberlain LLC. So you need some easier stuff. So you hold a BA from Princeton. I wasn't able to get into Princeton. And both a JD and MBA from Columbia. It's pretty good. That's pretty good. So definitely an awesome resume, and just so glad that we have you here in Michigan, and just working with you has been great. So
that's kind of you to say.
Well, thank you. I didn't screw any of that up, right? So we're good on that. Okay. So I'm going to start with a few questions. You answer them how you see fit. And then, like I said, at the end, if there are some in the Q&A, we'll gladly go to those. So first off, what is the forecast for economic development in the state for the coming year?
What is the forecast? Look, I'm an eternal optimist. The underlying fundamentals are quite strong. I think you see we have an attractive overall business climate. There's always things you can do to improve. I think the governor, I think Speaker Hall, I think SML Brinks have all basically said that. There's a lot for which we can be proud of, but there are things you can always improve. I do think the macroeconomic global clouds complicate things. While we have a diversified economy, we still have an economy that's largely very focused on the export sector, whether it be agribusiness or in automotive, mobility related. So given the conversation about tariffs, I think that has probably prevented companies from making significant expenditures of capital investment, and maybe have them pausing a little bit on hiring. But having said all that, I like our chances. We have what a lot of states are seeking, a very strong 2- and 4-year set of colleges and universities, plentiful water. We have a political leadership that's accessible at both the state and federal levels. And I think those things are critically important. We have to figure out and separate. I heard someone in Bloomberg radio today mentioning we have to separate the noise out of the system. And I think it's going to take some time for us to sort that out. But I think that we are well positioned relative to the rest of U.S. states. And the final thing I want to say is I think that we sometimes underplay the fact that we are an international state. I think that, in the immediate term with tariffs, there's concern about that. But I think long term, that's something that is incredibly beneficial. And with the opening of Gordie Howe, it'll just only accelerate what has been a tremendous commercial relationship with our neighbors to the north.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I know just in clients that we work with, those are big topics that get talked about, the tariffs and what that looks like. But, in the end, your answer to this and where we see Michigan going, I think is right on par. So thank you for that. What is the Make It in Michigan economic development strategy, and what does making it in Michigan mean to you?
So the Make It in Michigan economic development strategy is premised on maybe three things. One, Michigan has always been a state that's done deep tech, hard tech well. So if you have something that's complicated that needs to be manufactured, I would argue that there's no state or province in North America that's better than Michigan to have that occur. So it's built upon that. The second is that it understands that small and medium-sized businesses are critical to success. So those tier 2, tier 3, even tier 4 suppliers that are vital, whether it be in defense and aerospace, agribusiness, or automotive, or any other sector, are vitally important to not only Michigan's economic fortunes, but the U.S.'s. And then the last thing that Make It in Michigan is premised on is the fact that we have the number one asset in Michigan is really its residents, people who take pride in making things, growing things. And that pride of craftsmanship is something that it's hard to put a numerical dollar term on, but we talk to companies across the world who say that's one of the reasons why we want to be in Michigan. So Make It in Michigan is built upon that. But we understand that if we're going to have a successful economic development strategy, it has to be integrated. And we realize you have to attract and develop people. You have to cultivate and revitalize places because people have to have places that they want to live in. They want to socialize when they're not working. And at last, you have to compete for and win projects. So you have to make sure that you have a regulatory environment that tries to reduce red tape, speed to market. And you also have to make sure that you have the economic development tools to compete and help companies de-risk investment, especially in capital-intensive industries in these uncertain times. And so for what it means to me personally, it means that, hey, as someone who is a Michigander by choice, not by birth, it means that I can, even at, I may be young in heart, but I'm not as young as I would like to be chronologically. There is a great possibility for me, regardless of the next chapter of my life, post MEDC or whatever. It is really a tremendous place to plan the next 20 or 30 years as we think about some of the global phenomena that other places are going to be wrestling with. We're relatively, despite the challenges and our continued prayers for those dealing with the ice storm, but relatively speaking, we don't have the incidences and the frequency of extreme weather. We have plentiful water. We have a relatively diversified economy. We have a locational advantage that we're so close to the rest of the Canadian and American population. We have great airports with great lifts. And we have very beautiful scenic places that are cool to visit on both peninsulas. So that Make It in Michigan is, for me, having the best of all possible worlds. I think that's
Yeah.
possible here.
Yeah. and working with companies that do things in other states, the one thing you can always say is there's nothing like summertime in Michigan, and there's nothing like the environment that we do have here in this state. And once you really dig into it, there's no reason for anybody not to want to be here. And I think you've done a good job running the organization, from especially the people I work with personally, of that accessibility and understanding that. So thank you for the answer to that question, sir. This leads into the next question, which is actually kind of going through what you talked about in regards to having the tools in the toolbox, right? For companies to want to come here and for Michigan to be able to compete, because it is an arms race throughout the entire country. We both know this very well. I'm sure a lot of the people on this call do as well. What is your vision? And this is something that I'm very curious about, working in the states like Ohio too. But what is your vision for a more sustainable funding for the economic development in this state? And like to hear your response on what you'd like to see for sustainable funding.
Sure. I think there are a number of bills that have been introduced, and a number have been passed, whether it be data centers, legislation, creating an innovation fund, bringing back the R&D tax incentive, have all been positive things. Let me suggest the following. My vision is, I said this, and I say this before any committee of the legislature. My responsibility is to provide the best advice and counsel to the executive and legislative branches based upon what we are seeing in the marketplace, domestically and internationally. Ultimately, the duly elected public officials will decide the tools that are established for economic development, and we will use whatever tools we have to the best of our ability to compete and execute that Make It in Michigan strategy. As I stated earlier, we know states, provinces, countries are engaging, and like you said, it's an arms race to de-risk investment, especially in capital-intensive industries, where you can make an investment in CapEx, capital expenditure, and not be able to see profit for 3 or 4 years. And that, especially whether you're a public or private company, puts tremendous stress on your shareholders. And I think more and more companies are seeking partnerships with state governments to help de-risk that investment. You obviously have to do it in a responsible way, but it is something that companies and their consultants frequently ask about. I think from a policy standpoint, I would love to see us get My Hire done. I think there's bipartisan, bicameral support for that, which is really a payroll tax credit, which is a pay as you create opportunity as you add more and more to the payroll tax rolls in the state. I think that's responsible. We would love to see a permanent source of funding for what was formerly known as the Strategic Outreach and Attraction Reserve Fund, or SOAR Fund. We'd also love to see RAP, the Revitalization and Placemaking Grant Program, be secured. A number of properties across the state on both peninsulas that had for decades, in some cases, been off the tax rolls are now brought back on the tax rolls, brought back into combos, and adding to that place element of the Make It in Michigan strategy. And I think the last thing that obviously that we would love to see is to help companies understand that regardless of who's in the governor residence, Michigan is going to be consistent and wants to win opportunity. We understand that companies have a choice, whether you were born in Michigan or whether you're new to Michigan. Companies have an obligation to go where they can de-risk their investment. And that holds true for Michigan-based company or company founded in Michigan as those that we're competing for. So we need to have policies that can transcend any changes in the governor's residence or in legislature, because the last thing I'll say is economic development should be nonpartisan. at worst, it should be bipartisan because we all have aspirations to make sure that more and more people can realize the economic dreams and economic aspirations here in Michigan.
Yeah, and it's definitely interesting when you do see what other states and how it all works. And as you know, my background with real estate and business development prior to legislative work and here, we are constantly doing that. You know, it's a constant battle, especially on our borders. And I think that the strategies we impose make the difference. That's what's kept us, you know, in the running and sustainable. So I do appreciate that for sure. And definitely the need for more sustainable funding and more in keeping those programs. You know, wouldn't you say that's one of the key strategies to all this is having not just sustainable, but a plan that makes it more secure long term, right? We're not always a moving target. I think that would be part of this as well, if you would agree.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I mean, look, I mean, we all know predictability. Predictability where people can make 3 to 7 year forecasts based upon what's going to happen in the regulatory sphere is critically important. You know, one of the things that, you know, multinational companies assess is geopolitical risk. And, you know, you don't want that at the national level as a country, and you certainly don't want that at the subnational level as a state. And so you're absolutely right, Jason.
Yeah. All right. Next question. So we have clients that are obviously on this call. We have clients that'll be watching this webinar that may or may not have been able to make it due to scheduling conflicts or whatnot. So obviously I've worked with you, you know, with clients, and there's other members of our firm that have worked with you. But if there's some clients that haven't, but maybe have some interest in having a working relationship with you and MEDC, what would be an effective way for them to learn the process and to collaborate with you from your vision, your eyes on some potential new prospects that may have some opportunities that they don't realize that MEDC fits right into their wheelhouse? What would you say?
No, I appreciate the question. And I think the first thing is, you know, take a look. We have a website that's eminently searchable, www.michiganbusiness.org, www.michiganbusiness.org. There you can look and see what incentives might be available for your company and companies of all sizes and understand what must be true. I was looking for the chat. I'm happy to provide my my phone number is 517-881-5861, 517-881-5861. Email address is Messer, MESSER, the letter Q, as in quiet, at michigan.org. So that's messerq@michigan.org. So feel free to reach out to me. I will gladly put anyone on this webinar or anyone that passes this on and has a question about how MEDC or any other state agency. I mean, we want to be, ultimately, there's no wrong door. And one of the things that the governor has stressed in her administration, that there's not a wrong door. We can't expect people who are out there trying to compete in an incredibly globally competitive marketplace to know exactly the right governmental agency. So if it comes to MEDC and maybe it doesn't belong to us, we then work to find to where it does go, whether it's an EGLE question or a LAURA question or MDOT or LEO or any other of our sister agencies. So, you know, start with the website at www.michigan.org, or feel free to reach out to me at both by email, messerq@michigan.org, or via my cell, 517-881-5861.
Well, you are very accessible, and I will speak from experience that the other departments and collaboration has been good. And one example of that that I was grateful to work on was the Flint Buick City redevelopment. That was all departments. That was MEDC and EGLE and others working together, and your team, you know, putting that together. And tomorrow we have the first full building ribbon cutting, so on site. So I do appreciate that. And you do definitely have accessibility. We've all seen that and very much appreciate that, especially given what type of organization you run. So
Well, no,
sometimes, sometimes you don't have that.
well, that's kind of you to say congratulations to you and your client for that tremendous milestone at Buick City. And look, we are in the service business. I mean, in government, I mean, we have an obligation to customer service just like any other business has. And that's something that the governor, legislators of both parties have stressed. We try to inculcate that within our team at MEDC, and I want to make sure that I'm exemplifying that. And so you have to be accessible. That's the only way you learn, actually, because uh, you have clients across a universe of industries that give us early warning signals of what's happening in the market. How can we tweak policy to make it easier for there to be greater job and entrepreneurial creations opportunity, which is, the focus of the MEDC. So that's the only way that you're going to get real-time feedback is by making yourself accessible.
Which is great. On that note, one of the questions that have come up a few times that I've even heard is through the not-for-profit world, 501c3s. How much is MEDC involved in that world as far as, those community organizations or just those 501c3s being able to apply and to be eligible for grants through MEDC? Or is that a world that we need to look elsewhere?
So it's a great question. I mean, I think there are certain programs that certainly are applicable for 501c3s, whether it's we had an entrepreneurial support hub program that was led by our small business services team. I talked about places as part of making in Michigan people, places, and projects. In places, not-for-profit entities, I believe, can compete for revitalization and placemaking grants, or they can apply for our community revitalization grants. The eligibility is there. I think there's also the power of collaboration. When you start talking about not-for-profits, you're also talking about our institutions of higher ed, and they're a vital part of our business attraction and business retention and business expansion strategy as we think about collaboratively. What are those things? What are those disciplines? What are those skills that we need to make sure that the next generation of Michiganders possess in order for companies to continue to innovate here? There's a reason why you have so many R&D facilities here in Michigan, because of the tremendous academic content of our institutions of higher education at 2 and 4 year, their ability to upskill and reskill and continue improvement in our K-12 space to make sure that we have more and more young people going in funnel, ways to re-educate people who want to be retooled and reskilled and interesting, and making sure that they have the skills to compete in a highly automated, maybe generative AI driven world that's going to change the complexion of what it means to work. And so not-for-profits are vitally a part of that. I would need to know a specific fact pattern to advise. I mean, obviously there are entities that maybe more directly provide support. Just one of the things that may not be known about MEDC, within MEDC, we have State Historical Preservation Office is a part of MEDC, as is the Michigan Arts and Culture Council, as is Travel Michigan. And frequently we have all manner of not-for-profit entities across multiple industries with whom we engage.
Yeah, good. That's good to know. Here's another more specific question as well. So there is a project underway. It's in St. Joe, Michigan. It's to soften the shoreline to prevent future erosion. How does MEDC support critical projects like this, where tourism, infrastructure, and private property are all part of it and at risk?
Yeah, I would say that, candidly, I'm not aware of the specific fact pattern. So I can't, I
Mhm.
don't want to comment and say about this, the specific programs. The one thing I think is important for your clients and those who might watch this subsequently is that we at MEDC are bound by the statutory constraints that the state legislature and others impose upon how the various programs that we have at our disposal are created and how they're enacted. So, I want to follow up offline about this particular program,
Yeah,
this particular project. I'm not aware of it, but one of the things that we try to do is work with local government as well as our regional economic development partnerships. In that case with St. Joe, you're probably talking about Cornerstone Alliance, to see whether or not they are involved in any way and see if there are things that we can provide. The one thing that I think we are trying to get better at is letting people understand and know the what must be truths to secure MEDC recommended Michigan Strategic Fund Board approved financial support. And I think it's important for us to be very clear about the what must be truths so that we manage people's expectation. And more importantly, we respect people's time because we don't want people to going down an alley thinking that something is possible. And maybe because of statute, it's not possible or they're ineligible. So we try to lay that out up front.
yeah. And I will say, a lot of people may not even realize that there's the strategic fund board that approves all funding. So I'm glad you brought that up too. It's not just one person making these decisions, obviously.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
So since you've been here in Michigan, what has surprised you the most about the state as a whole and just the economy and the way our state economy works?
I think the biggest surprise, I'm a Southerner. I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. I lived all across the country, but moved up from Louisiana. And Southerners have a reputation for being very hospitable. I would say Michiganders can compete with anywhere in the South. Just how cool Michiganders are as people. If they know that you are all in on Michigan, I've never been around a group of people that will try to help and really in big and small ways make you really feel a part like of this 10 plus million extended family that we have here. So that's been the biggest personal. I think from a business perspective is how remarkably diversified the economy is. I I mean, everybody knows of Michigan, but I didn't know just the breadth of the economy. I think too often we allow ourselves to get pigeonholed as just mobility or just agribusiness or we aren't just anything. I mean, when you look at, from aerospace and defense to medical devices to life sciences to fintech to insurance tech, to fashion. It is amazing the breadth and depth of companies and creativity. Because most companies, if you're going to be successful, you're successful because you're solving a problem or you're addressing a human need. And we have companies who've done that for generations, and we have some relatively new. So just to be a part of the team that gets to kind of tell the world who we are today, because there are some lagging perceptions of who Michigan is, has been the pleasure of a lifetime.
It's a great answer to that because you are right. You're kind of pigeonholed as, the automotive or manufacturing type, but it's amazing the diverse number of companies and a lot of people that wouldn't realize what companies' headquarters are actually here or how many amazing products and companies started in Michigan and remained in Michigan during their 30, 40, 50, 100-year history. That is 100% correct on that. So yeah, kudos to that. One more last call for Q&A. If you have any, throw some in there. I have one more question on my list, and if nobody else puts in any Q&A, we'll wrap it up, and thank you for your time. So we all know that you are a sports fanatic. So, what sports analogies do you enjoy most when describing Michigan or working with Team Michigan?
This is such a great question because I have to pick one. I and this is probably recency bias, the Pistons. And they have, and I hope I get it right, it's called just do work. So you go to the game and they do the portal montage and they talk about other places being, hype and glitz and glamour, but you got to put in the work. And I think that's Michigan. I think in some respects we are a little too humble. I think that we probably don't, and I'm working on this, I have to be better about this. You have to tell the story. You have to be able to have the receipts, but you have to tell the story. And you know this from your career in electoral politics. You can do all the work and be a hardworking legislator, but if you don't let people know, if you aren't telling your story, if you aren't constantly making sure that people understand what you delivered, you can make the argument might as well not have delivered anything at all. And in an era of information overload, especially at the company level, I mean, companies are just trying to figure out how to have profitable growth in a world that is becoming more and more unpredictable. Geopolitical relationships are evolving. How do you make heads or tails and all that? How do you break through the noise? And I think we have a great story to tell. We have to not be afraid to tell the story. It's not enough just to say, oh, the work will justify itself. Of course, people will sort of see what we bring to the table as Team Michigan. And just like companies have to tell their stories and manage perception in the marketplace, we as a state have to do that. Our lead cities and suburbs have to do that. And because it's a global competition for attention to get into the consideration set. But I'm encouraged. The most important thing is we have a great story to tell. That's, for most people, that's the biggest problem. Their story is not that great.
Right.
We have arguably the opposite problem. We have a great story. We now have to feel comfortable telling it.
Yeah. What is your sport of choice, out of curiosity? What do you like to watch the most?
I'm still a college football,
Me too.
pro football guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. Although watching the Masters was fun, so I enjoy it.
Yeah. The drama, the human interest.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Rory. I mean, that's what a journey. And just you got me on sports. Imagine, he had such success early. He completed 3 of the 4 Grand Slams, arguably before he was 25, I think, or 26. He was quite young. And to have the pressure and the near misses and what happened on the 72nd hole yesterday, and then to kind of quiet himself, and what a great round Justin Rose had, and to put it all together on the 73rd hole was tremendous. And I think in many respects, that's Michigan. Michigan has had ups and downs and been counted out, and here comes Michigan. 73rd hole or whatever hole it takes. We're going to be there at the end. And we can't take anything for granted. But that intestinal fortitude.
Yeah, that is weathering the storm. The first Masters winner to have 3 double bogeys and still win the Masters. That's intestinal fortitude to keep moving forward for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, we've come to the end of our webinar, and seeing no other questions. I do want to thank you again for taking the time today. It was it's important for our clients. It's important for others to hear and see what's going on economically, and through the MEDC in our state. I truly appreciate you taking the time for us, and everyone here in the KC family appreciate you taking time as well. Always look forward to a great working relationship with you and all of our clients. And I don't know if you have any parting words before we say goodbye.
Hey, I just thank you, Jason, and to your entire team at Kelly Carthorne, and to all all your clients that continue to invest in Michigan. Thank you. We are honored to have earned that investment, and we want to get better. So please feel free to reach out to me so that we can get better and make sure that policy that we're making is reflective of today's marketplace realities. And go Tigers and go Pistons.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll get your information to the folks too that were on this webinar and make it sure that it's accessible to all of us.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Yeah,
Stay
have a
safe,
good day.
everybody. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye now.